committee or the subcommittee on energy and mineral resources will come to order. Good morning or good afternoon, depending upon where you are. Welcome to the subcommittee. We're meeting today to hear testimony on 3 bills: Representative Cartwright's Surface Mining Control and Reclamation Act amendments of 2021, Representative Cartwright's Revitalizing the Economy of Coal Communities by leveraging local activities and investing more, and that's the Act of 2021, and that's otherwise known as the Reclaim Act. And we're pleased to have Representative LaHood Community Reclamation Partnership Act. Under Committee Rule 4F, any oral opening statements at hearings are limited to the chair and the ranking minority member or their designees. This will allow us to hear from our witnesses sooner and help members keep to their schedule. I hope, I appreciate you're all waiting as we had to start this hearing a little later. But I'm going to ask for unanimous consent that all other members' opening statements be made part of the hearing record if they're submitted to the clerk by 5 p.m. today or at the close of the hearing, whichever comes first. Hearing no objection, so ordered. Without objection, the chair may also declare a recess subject to the call of the chair. Without objection, a member from Pennsylvania, Representative Thompson, and the member from Wyoming, Representative Cheney, are authorized to question the witnesses in today's hearing. As described in the notice, statements, documents, or motions must be submitted to the electronic repository at hnrc.docs@mail.house.gov. Additionally, please note that as with in-person meetings, members are responsible for their own microphones. As with our in-person meetings, members can be muted by staff only to avoid inadvertent background noise. Finally, members or witnesses experiencing technical problems should inform committee staff immediately. With that, I'm going to begin my opening statement. First, I want to note the bipartisan nature of this hearing. These bills have significant support from members of both parties, and I'd like to thank Ranking Member Stauber and the Minority Committee staff for working so cooperatively with the Majority Committee staff in putting together this hearing. Coal is a complicated issue. For centuries, coal mining was the foundation of life in Appalachia. The industry provided union jobs for generations of families. It helped build entire towns and supported vibrant communities. And these communities take justified pride in the role that coal played in helping this country win World War II. But while the coal industry boomed, its impact on the environment and the health of nearby residents was often a secondary consideration. Centuries of poorly regulated coal mining led to tens of thousands of unreclaimed, abandoned mines, mountains of waste rock, dangerous and unstable mine shafts, and watersheds so polluted that they run red with contamination. In 1977, the Congress passed the Surface Mining Control and Reclamation Act, or SMCRA, which created a system to ensure that all new surface mines would not leave behind those same scars. SMCRA also established a system for cleaning up mines abandoned before 1977, with coal companies chipping in a small fee per ton of coal that was mined to fix their industry's legacy of health, safety, and environmental hazards. So far, over $6 billion have been provided to states and tribes across the country to clean up these sites. That's $6 billion of cleaner water, cleaner land, jobs, and economic opportunity. I look forward to hearing some of those successes today. But the cleanup is far from done. There are still an estimated $11.4 billion worth of abandoned mines left to reclaim in the United States. And those numbers continue to rise with inflation and as new hazards are discovered. Unfortunately, the abandoned mine land program is expiring on September 30th of this year. That leaves less than 6 months for Congress to get this done. But given the tremendous bipartisan support for this program, I believe we can make that happen in time. If the AML fee were to expire today, there would be a little over $2 billion left. That's not nearly enough, and this problem isn't going to go away on its own. Beyond that, beyond just cleaning up abandoned mines, investing in coal country is more important now than ever. With coal in decline and record numbers of companies filing for bankruptcy, places like Appalachia are being left behind with devastating environmental degradation, polluted drinking water, and chronic health impacts. Workers need new jobs and opportunities, and they need them now. Reauthorizing the AML fund, passing the Reclaim Act, and passing the Community Reclamation Partnership Act will do just that. They will help revitalize regions of the country hit hardest by the coal industry's downturn. These bills will help create good jobs and a safer, healthier environment. The Community Reclamation Partnership Act is a good Samaritan bill that lets third-party groups like environmental and wildlife organizations and aid in AML projects without having to assume liability. It is something that will speed up reclamation and encourage more community input. The Reclaim Act specifically emphasizes economic rebirth by funding projects that lead to community development after reclamation. Things like new commercial spaces or parks for recreation that put people back to work in the short and in the long term. Importantly, reclaim projects will be developed with community input, something that is essential to making the best possible decisions. No one knows what will benefit a community more than the people who actually live there. This challenge is not unique to Appalachia or to coal country, nor is it unique to our current time. Scores of fossil fuel development countries around the country have lived through generations of boom and bust cycles that gutted towns and destroyed families because of the simple vagaries of the market. If a town survived and if people stayed, they would wait until prices recovered and the good times could roll again. Then the process would repeat. We can decide to double down on this pattern and consign millions of Americans to an ongoing cycle of relative good times, followed by crippling local depressions. Or we can use the need to carry out energy transition to create new opportunities, ones that are longer lasting, healthier for people, and safer for the environment. Reclaim is one example of how to do that. It's a critical part in upholding our promises to not abandon the people and the communities that help to build this nation. It's not the only part of what we need to do to help those areas that have a hard time seeing their future and seeing where we'll be on the other side of the energy transition. I'm proud to be supporting personally Reclaim and the Community Reclamation Partnership Act, and I look forward to continuing to work with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to find solutions for all the workers and the communities across the country that so badly need help. With that, I look forward to the testimony of our witnesses, and because we were delayed, I'm going to wait for a minute to have a few minutes before Ranking Member Stauber and Ranking Member on the committee Westerman make statements, and we're going to move immediately to panel one, and I'm going to call first Representative LaHood, the representative from Illinois' 18th District, and the sponsor of H.R. 1146, the Community Reclamation Partnership Act. Mr. LaHood, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for having me today. And as a former member of the Natural Resources Committee, it's nice to be back, although virtually, and to be with some familiar faces. I also want to thank Ranking Member Stauber and the members of the subcommittee, and of course, Chairman Grijalva and Ranking Member Westerman for inviting me to testify on my legislation, which is H.R. 1146, the Community Reclamation Partnerships Act. In the 115th Congress, Mr. Chairman, this legislation was passed by the House of Representatives with strong bipartisan support. In the 116th Congress, it received, again, strong bipartisan support within this committee. I look forward to working again with this committee, House leadership, and interested stakeholders on this important issue for the 117th Congress, and I'm hopeful we can get it across the finish line in the next 2 years. The Community Reclamation Partnerships Act will help address the complex legal and funding related challenges for abandoned mines lands across the nation. The Community Reclamation Partners Act amends the Surface Mining Control and Reclamation Act of 1977, SMCRA, as you referenced, to enable states to partner with non-governmental entities to reclaim abandoned mine sites and facilitate acid mine drainage cleanup across the country. Non-governmental entities like Trout Unlimited have recognized the need for reclamation in coal communities and are willing to contribute their resources and expertise to address the problem. Chris Wood, President and CEO of Trout Unlimited, testified before this subcommittee last Congress in support of the legislation. Unfortunately, liability and regulatory concerns have discouraged these groups from partnering with the states on reclamation projects. This legislation enables NGO participation in state reclamation programs by minimizing undeserved liability and codifying proven practices established by the state reclamation agencies. This legislation also addresses a frequent problem that states experience in addressing water pollution at abandoned mine land sites. States must choose between risking non-compliance under the Clean Water Act or foregoing acid mine drainage abatement projects altogether. Some states, like Pennsylvania, have successfully addressed this problem by establishing their own guidelines for the treatment of water pollution at abandoned mine sites. These state-specific strategies have resulted in successful water treatment projects and a significant reduction in acid mine drainage in several states. Currently, state reclamation activities have been funded solely by fees levied on the coal industry over the past 4 decades. These fees have resulted in the reclamation of approximately $4 billion of abandoned mine land liabilities. However, according to the Department of Interior, the estimated remediation costs exceed $10 billion. The outstanding abandoned mine liabilities in Illinois, my home state, is approximately $165 million, and in the 18th Congressional District, it's $17 million. The cost of reclaiming these sites will continue to strain state resources in the coming decades, and the conditions of these sites will only worsen over time. In short, Mr. Chairman, this bill empowers state and local leaders who want to assist in abandoned mine cleanup efforts so that future development can occur in these areas. No group should be punished for wanting to help out their local community in a responsible way. I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your time today, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. LaHood. Now we'll follow with Mr. Cartwright, the representative from Pennsylvania's 8th District and the sponsor of both the Surface Mining Control and Reclamation Act amendments of 2021 and the Reclaim Act. Mr. Cartwright, like Mr. LaHood, is a former member of the Committee on Natural Resources Committee. Mr. Cartwright, welcome back to the subcommittee, and you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Very good. Yes, it's nice to be back at Natural Resources. Spent many happy years on this committee, and good to see some familiar faces. And I'm proud once again to discuss the Reclaim Act, H.R. 1733, the Revitalizing the Economy of Coal Communities by leveraging local activities and investing more, the Reclaim Act of 2021. And also HR 1734, SMACRA amendments of 2021, or the AML, the Abandoned Minelands Trust Fund reauthorization. Both pieces of legislation would make meaningful positive impact on the lives of our citizens in historic coal country, as you have mentioned, Mr. Chair. I would like to thank Congressman G.T. Thompson for being the Republican lead and longtime champion for reauthorizing the AML. The Abandoned Minelands Trust Fund that was established through Surface Mining Control and Reclamation Act of 1977, SMACRA, and is set to expire in September of this year. Now, since its creation in 1977, federal funding in the AML Trust Fund has transformed the landscape and communities across historic coal country. AML Trust Fund has helped eliminate over 46,000 open mine portals and restored water supplies to countless residents of coalfield communities, all while creating jobs and economic opportunity. But it is estimated that it will cost at least $10 billion more to reclaim the remaining high priority AML sites across the country, including 300 sites just in my own district in northeastern Pennsylvania, work that could go unfinished if the AML Trust Fund is not reauthorized. Reclaiming these mines can transform communities. Again, in my own district in northeastern Pennsylvania, I think of the Arena Hub Plaza, the distribution centers in Hazleton, and the site of a new high school in Wilkes-Barre. These are all former abandoned mineland sites that are now or are soon to be places that drive economic growth and opportunity. We have our success stories, but our work is far from over. The Lackawanna River, the Susquehanna River, and tributaries still bear scars from abandoned mine lands. Some of that water comes out of these holes in the landscape as bright orange plumes from the iron oxide and rust that has reached the surface from the iron deposit underground. The air is also contaminated with the smell from abandoned mine basements, sewer systems, and old mine air shafts. The health risks to our communities, the environment, and the wildlife in these areas cannot be overstated. If we allow the AML Trust Fund to expire at the end of this fiscal year, this urgent work to restore our lands will never be finished, and our communities will continue to suffer indefinitely. Not only do we need to reauthorize AML, but we have the opportunity to accelerate the benefits that reclamation can bring. My friends and colleagues, Congressman Hal Rogers, Don Beyer, and G.T. Thompson, have helped me lead the fight to pass the Reclaim Act. And I would like to extend a special note of appreciation and acknowledgement for Congressman Rogers, who was the original author of that bill several Congresses ago. The Reclaim Act accelerates the release of $1 billion that is already sitting in the Abandoned Mineland Trust Fund unused. This money would clean up these mine sites more quickly to promote economic revitalization, diversification, and development in economically distressed mining communities. Yes, it's good that that money is in the AML Trust Fund, but no, it's bad because it should be being put to use right now. These are urgent needs. So together, the AML Reauthorization Act and the Reclaim Act continue and accelerate funding for communities that have been scarred by coal mining, allowing them to repurpose hazardous mining sites into opportunities for job growth and economic creation. These are bills supported by both Republicans and Democrats, passed out on voice vote from this committee last year because we all agree that protecting our clean water and creating jobs is the right thing to do for the people that we represent. Ensuring that this work can continue will fuel the creation of good-paying jobs and pave the way for new economic opportunities while revitalizing our lands and cleaning up our waterways. These bills are common sense, practical, bipartisan, job-creating proposals and just the exact thing that Congress should be working on and passing, and it's what our constituents expect of us. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for considering these bills today. Thank you for inviting me to testimony. I yield back, and I hope to be able to get a chance to introduce your next witness.
Well, thank you, Mr. Cartwright. But before we go there, to introduce the second panel, I'm going to recognize both Ranking Member Stauber and Ranking Member of the full committee, Westerman, for opening comments. Ranking Member Stauber, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Today, the subcommittee will consider 3 bills, 1 Republican-led and 2 bipartisan efforts to discuss the future of the Abandoned Mineland Program, also known as AML program. Despite the narrative that coal is no longer a viable solution, just under 50% of the mid-continent energy grid is powered by coal. Therefore, coal keeps the light and heat on during the long, cold, and dark winters in my district of Northeast Minnesota. Coal production also supports critical services in energy producing states, including funding for schools, infrastructure, and environmental mitigation. And further disputing the claims by some, quote, keep it in the ground, end quote, anti-energy activists, the U.S. has enough coal reserves to power our country for many, many years to come. In fact, we have over 250 billion short tons available, enough to power us for 3.5 centuries. Extraction, transportation, and use of coal has never been a safer process than it is right now. In fact, in my hometown of Duluth, Minnesota, coal is the second biggest product by tonnage, behind only iron ore, to move through the Duluth Superior Harbor, the largest freshwater port in the world. That being said, it's imperative we take care of the legacy mines left behind to ensure communities nationwide live in
I'm going after.
That being said, it is imperative we take care of the legacy mines left behind to ensure communities nationwide live in a clean and healthy environment. I share with my colleagues the bipartisan intent of listening to a robust debate and discussing abandoned mine lands, whether it be Montana or Pennsylvania, Wyoming, West Virginia, North Dakota, or Kentucky. Let's find a solution that works across geography, chamber, and party. H.R. 1734, sponsored by Congressman Cartwright and Congressman Glenn Thompson, would extend the AML program for another 15 years by reauthorizing the fee on every ton of coal produced at the current levels. This program has enabled states and tribes to clean up mine sites abandoned before our modern environmental laws and regulations existed. Through this program, coal companies have financed the cleanup of nearly 900,000 acres of lands and waters impacted by abandoned mines, while creating jobs and contributing to economic development in coal country. H.R. 1733, sponsored by Congressman Cartwright and Congressman Hal Rogers, accelerates the release of $1 billion over 5 years for mine remediation to spur economic revitalization. Funding for this bill uses part of the unappropriated balance in the AML fund, which has already been accrued by past operations. Congressman LaHood's H.R. 1146 will allow third-party organizations to assist in cleanup efforts by shielding them from liability as they partner with state AML programs. In turn, more non-governmental organizations will feel comfortable to help clean up AMLs and continue promoting high quality of life in rural communities. Given the bipartisan support for the AML program, we must have a realistic conversation about where that funding comes from, a fee on the coal industry. Let's ensure a sustainable cleanup program by supporting a healthy and productive coal industry to support the program. The AML program was last reauthorized in 2006, when U.S. coal production totaled a record-breaking 1.162 million tons. In 2019, U.S. coal production came to 706 million tons, a decrease of around 39%. These trends are not driven by a lack of resources, but because federal policies have made it more expensive to do business. Let's not choose policies that slow or halt coal production while calling on coal producers to fund programs like AML for the foreseeable future. We need AML funding and therefore coal production to continue if we want to clean up remaining sites. I thank the witnesses for being here today, and I look forward to a productive discussion. Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Stauber. I now recognize the Ranking Member of Full Committee, Mr. Westerman.
Well, thank you, Chairman Lowenthal and Ranking Member Stauber. I'm glad that we're here having a bipartisan hearing in the subcommittee today. I hope this trend continues, and I look forward to working with my colleagues on this and other important issues. The only thing that could make it better, Mr. Chairman, would be if we were all here in person. So I hope everybody's got their shots and that soon we can get back in the committee room and get witnesses in here and get rid of this technology which delays us as much as it helps us, and carry on business the way we're used to doing that. But again, a bipartisan hearing, and these three bills all concern issues of abandoned coal mines and the AML program. We can all agree that unfortunately, the historic problem of AML sites is ongoing. Remediating these abandoned mines not only removes health and safety hazards, but also provides environmental restoration and opportunities for economic development in coal communities nationwide. This is an important conversation to have, and a key element of that conversation is how we balance our conservation goals with the future of the coal industry. I think examining that balance is central to the continued success of this program. There is also a reality here that we must address. The fact is there's been a 39% reduction in the amount of coal produced today compared to the last time the AML fee was reauthorized. Let's also remember that the modern coal industry was not responsible for those abandoned mine sites, and yet has been funding their cleanup for over 40 years. Circumstances change over time, and as legislators, we must be flexible enough to take that into account. As an engineer, I always like to check my math. We need to make sure that the equation is balanced here if we want the AML program to continue. Another angle we should consider when we look at this program and other aspects of coal production are the alternative and future uses of coal. With advanced technology, acid mine drainage and other coal byproducts have been given new value. We are now able to extract rare earth elements and other critical minerals from coal and byproducts of the mining process. My colleagues and I have discussed many times how important these minerals will be to our future, especially in renewable energy development and battery storage. There are many companies making great strides in this space, and I'm optimistic to see what other innovations will emerge. There's no question that the AML program has done a lot of good, and a lot more can be accomplished. I would just remind my colleagues that in order to be good environmental stewards, we also need to be good accountants. I look forward to the discussion today. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Westerman. We're now going to move on to our second panel, and I'm going to ask first I'm going to yield to Representative Cartwright to introduce our first witness.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you also to the ranking member for making that statement. I just came from an Interior Appropriations hearing where we heard from a representative from the Nestle company about something called extended producer responsibility. The idea is very much the same as AML, a small fee from ongoing operations to promote recycling of plastic, a very exciting concept. But today I have the great honor and privilege to introduce Mr. Robert Bobby Hughes, the Executive Director of Epcamer, the Eastern Pennsylvania Coalition for Abandoned Mine Reclamation. For the past 24 years, he has been in that post. Bobby's really made himself one of the foremost experts and leaders nationally in abandoned mine reclamation. And I challenge anybody to find somebody with as much passion for this work as Bobby Hughes. From his education in environmental resource management at Penn State to his countless awards for environmental excellence, for his work on abandoned mine reclamation, and abandoned mine drainage. Bobby Hughes has been on the front line of combating these issues through remediation, education, community outreach, and advocacy for crucial change. Also continuously innovating and pushing the envelope for mine reclamation, including his recent work advancing the use of these reclaimed sites for solar energy production. So I'm proud to call Bobby Hughes a friend of mine and a partner in this vital work for Northeastern Pennsylvania, Appalachia, and the nation. And it is my honor to introduce him to the panel here today. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I'm going to call on Representative Cheney, if she's on here now, to introduce Todd Parfit, Director of the Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality. Well,
thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thanks also to Ranking Member Stauber and Ranking Member Westerman. Thanks for the opportunity today. Obviously, this issue of abandoned mine lands is crucially important to us in Wyoming, as we pay more into the program than any other state. And we're really pleased to have the opportunity today to have with us Todd Parfit, who serves as the Director of the Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality. Todd was appointed to the position first by Governor Matt Mead in 2012, and then reappointed by Governor Mark Gordon in 2019. And Todd's got 27 years of experience with the Wyoming DEQ, including 7 years in the dual role as Deputy Director and Administrator of the Industrial Siting Division. He has testified numerous times before our committee and over on the Senate side, and really pleased that he was able to join us today. And thank you very much, Chairman Lowenthal, for the opportunity to introduce Todd and to be with you all today. Thank you, and I yield back.
thank you. I'm going to be a little bit briefer. Not that those were not brief, but I'm going to move us along. Next is Marisa Lewausenheiser, who is the Program Director for Rural Action in Mineral City, Ohio. Then we have John Stefanko, who is the Deputy Secretary for the Office of Active and Abandoned Mine Operations at the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, and will be testifying today on behalf of the Interstation Mining Compact Commission. And finally, we have Susan Kozak, who is the Director for the Soil Conservation and Water Quality Division for the Iowa Department of Agriculture and Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship. Ms. Kozak is also the President of the National Association of Abandoned Mine Land Programs. So now I'm going to remind the witnesses that under our committee rules, they must limit their oral statements to 5 minutes, but that their entire statement will appear in the hearing record. When you begin, the timer will begin, and then it will turn orange when you have 1 minute remaining. I recommend that members and witnesses joining remotely use the grid view so they may look or they may lock the timer on their screen. After your testimony is complete, please remember to mute yourself to avoid any inadvertent background noise. I will also allow the entire panel to testify before questioning the witnesses. Now I'm going to begin and recognize Ms. Lutenhauser for 5 minutes. Welcome, Ms. Lutenhauser.
Thank you very much, Chairman Lowenthal and Ranking Member Stauber, and thank you to Representatives Cartwright and Thompson and all the other co-sponsors of House Resolution 1733 and 1734. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today on behalf of Rural Action and describe not only the need that we see in our region, but the opportunity and excitement that has also started growing in our towns. We are a regional nonprofit in Appalachian, Ohio. We strive to build a more just economy by developing the region's assets in environmentally, socially, and economically sustainable ways. I live outside of a village named Mineral City, if that gives you any indication of our economic history. We were built around coal and experienced the subsequent boom and bust cycles. My grandfather delivered coal to homes, and my great-grandfather was a miner in the exact same mines that Rural Action is now working to clean up. My privileges of an education, a safe home, and food on my table came in part because of the hard work of my family members in the coal industry and the rich natural assets of our region. I want my son to have the same opportunity to pursue a career tied to the natural resources of our home too. HR 1733, the Reclaim Act, and HR 1734, reauthorization of SMACRA, would allow for those opportunities. Part of Rural Action's core work has been reclaiming abandoned coal mines and restoring streams impacted by mine discharges. We've done this since 1995. Our work has been successful in part because of the investments by SMACRA and the innovation and dedication of our partners. These bills have bipartisan support for a reason. No one believes that streams should continue to be stained orange and devoid of life. The Ohio Department of Natural Resources has always partnered with groups like ours to help identify and inventory our abandoned mineland issues, and has recently undertaken the development of 12 restoration projects with the AML Economic Development Pilot Program. With pilot funding, we are building a pigment factory at the largest acid mine drainage seep in Ohio. It'll turn 1,000 gallons of pollution every minute into a marketable product. Ohio is creating a world-class mountain bike trail to boost the outdoor recreation economy, weaving 88 miles of trails between abandoned mineland features. And we're connecting our communities, giving them refreshed pride and encouraging business and manufacturing back to our hills. Reauthorization and reclaim would encourage this type of innovative reclamation that paves the way for new development in a region that needs it so badly. As large as the opportunity is, the need is equally great. Ohio has over 1 million acres of abandoned mine lands and more than 1,300 miles of acid mine drainage polluted streams. E-Analyst lists $500 million in inventory waiting to be reclaimed in my state. In my county alone, it would take $37 million to clean up the AML hazards. Currently, Ohio's AML grant is only enough to address public health and safety emergencies, with none left over for other priorities. The language included in HR 1734 to increase minimum program states from a $3 million to a $5 million annual grant, as well as covering emergencies with federal funding instead of state funds, would help ensure that our work continues and that reclamation happens where it is most needed. We need to reauthorize SMACRA now or risk falling even further behind. I've come to understand the urgency around abandoned mineland reclamation as an environmental justice issue. In 1997, only one fish species was found at what should be the most biodiverse monitoring site in the Huff Run watershed, the stream that I live next to. As a result of reclamation projects in the basin, today 25 species of fish can be found at that same site, including 2 new species that we just found last year. Our stream is still stained orange, but it certainly isn't dead, due in part to the investments of AML grants and good partnership. Economic development just can't happen in towns where you shouldn't touch the water in your own backyard. Reclaim can invest in places like Huff Run and the thousands of other acid mine drainage impacted areas in Appalachia. It is vital that you pass reauthorization and reclaim and pass them together. And then we need to figure out how we will continue to pay for AML remediation as part of a just transition for citizens impacted by changes in this nation's energy economy. Please continue this conversation and continue to bring in people like me who are on the front lines of reclamation and reimagining what a new future holds for the places that we live and that we love. Thank you for having me here today, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Loautzen-Heiser. I hope I pronounced that correctly. The chair now recognizes Mr. Hughes for 5 minutes.
Chairman, ranking members, Representative Chairman Lowenthal, and members of the committee here on natural resources, thank you for allowing me to present testimony here today before all of you. Epcamer is a regional environmental nonprofit that's mission is to encourage the reclamation and redevelopment of abandoned mine lands and mine water that's affected by past mining practices. And we represent the interests of community groups and conservation districts and coalfield communities throughout northeastern and north central Pennsylvania's anthracite and bituminous coal region. We cover 16 counties in northern Appalachia. And we have about 26 years of experience in working on AMD and AML. I spent my entire career with Epcamer building strong community partnerships to address our mine-scarred landscapes and polluted waterways with my neighbors and my friends. I lived in the center of the northern anthracite coal fields my entire life among the shadows of hundreds of countless AML features. And honestly, I've become really tired of continuing to have to look at them 25 years into my career. Granted, we've made some progress and had lots of successes, but not nearly enough. I have 3 children and 2 grandchildren right now growing up in the region who, frankly, they deserve a better quality of life. We can do better as a nation. Even after all the accomplishments that Epcamer and our partners have had, I personally feel like I failed them and should be doing even more. So I'm here testifying before you all because I can't do more for them than my communities and our nation's coalfield communities that I'm trying to my best to represent if HR 1734 isn't extended and passed. Most of the streams I've grown up around are still running orange to this day. There's very large flows, expansive underground mine pools, a lack of private investment in the reuse of the mine water, liability concerns, and expensive projected treatment costs are just some of the reasons why this pollution remains. It is an environmental justice that my family and our communities across the country still have to continue to live with this legacy of past mining. Throughout Appalachia, 5.5 million people and at least 2.5 million people in Pennsylvania live within 1 mile of an abandoned mine site. Our coal regions are scattered with health and safety hazards, waste coal piles, illegal dumping, mine drainage, and poverty-stricken environmental justice communities. The projected costs of land reclamation, mine fire extinguishment, and AMD cleanup remediation are in the billions of dollars. They vary by site conditions, availability of cover materials, site constraints, the AMD quality, and the flow of these discharges. Our Pennsylvania AML campaigns gathered over 128 supporters that keep coming forward. Trout Unlimited nationally, Pennsylvania Council of Trout Unlimited, our 49 chapters, nonprofit organizations, conservation districts, municipalities, and Pennsylvania county governments, Susquehanna River Basin Commission, our Association of Conservation Districts, the General Assembly even, and our State Conservation Commission and the governor all support reauthorization of HR 1734. You'll see in my testimony I submitted there are 5 letters of support from various businesses that talk about job creation, economic investment, and the importance of environmental cleanup, the protection of home ownership from businesses and from mine subsidence insurance, and the public health and safety that we have to deal with. Many organizations are in support of reauthorization across the country nationally. And, Pennsylvania has the most AML sites. West Virginia is second. However, those problems extend south to Alabama, north to Arkansas, west to Montana and Wyoming's Powder River Basin, and to tribal lands on the 4 corners of the Southwest. SMACRA continues to eliminate these health and safety hazards in our communities. There's 600 companies in Pennsylvania alone that are doing work contractually for reclamation. This is a great opportunity for even people that are transitioning from coal industry to the field of abandoned mine reclamation for work. Reclamation of AML could lead to regional economies by creating jobs and generating local municipal taxes, county taxes, and revenue for school districts. As a part of our AML campaign, an unfunded sort of informal collective of local and national organizations that advocate for the policies and programs on abandoned mine reclamation, we support fully reauthorizing the AML Trust Fund through 2037. Other focal points on SMACRA can be found in the publication that's highlighted in my testimony. So we encourage you and welcome you by more bipartisan support and leadership to step forward and co-sponsor 1734. As far as the Reclaim Act, That money, that $1 billion that could be released from the fund, there's potentially $291 million that could be distributed over 5 years to Pennsylvania. Epcamer has recently completed the development of a GIS site selection criteria tool that will allow us to work with interested solar developers to potentially site community solar projects on formerly reclaimed abandoned mineland sites throughout the anthracite region. Nearly a dozen companies from around the country have called us already since the release of the Reclaiming Appalachia Coalition's 2020 report. This is just one example of the possibilities to come. So HR 1733 is a major opportunity for disadvantaged communities and environmental justice communities to provide good jobs and economic stability for our communities. And finally, Epcamer and our Triad Limited members support the HR 1146 because it will increase the ability of our third-party groups and watershed groups and TU chapters around the country to use some of their own money and funds and their organizational capacities to help clean up streams and watersheds affected by AMD. Now more than ever, we need to turn to the potential of these AML and AMD discharges into possibilities and a reality by passing these vital bills. These bills can showcase the beginning points of a bipartisan victory for economic recovery for the people and places that powered the United States for generations. The time is now. So thank you for allowing me to share you with the importance of these bills and their passage on behalf of our many coalfield communities, our AML campaign, and national partners in reclamation.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes. The chair now recognizes Mr. Stefanko for 5 minutes. Mr. Stefanko, can you unmute yourself?
My apologies, Mr. Chairman. I thought I had. Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee, my name is John Stefanko, and I am a Deputy Secretary with the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. I am testifying today on behalf of the Interstate Mining Compact Commission, which is a multi-state governmental organization representing the natural resource and environmental protection interests of its 26 member states. We appreciate the opportunity to address 3 critical pieces of legislation that will determine the future of the abandoned mineland program under the Surface Mining Control and Reclamation Act. HR 1734 on reauthorization will determine whether future funding is generated for the program. HR 1733, the Reclaim Act, will determine how existing monies in the AML Trust Fund will be distributed and spent. And HR 1146 will leverage AML dollars and expand opportunities to improve water quality. The timing for action on reauthorization legislation is particularly critical given the looming expiration of fee collection authority on September 30th of this year. We have noted in previous testimony and again today in our written statement, a significant amount of AML work that has taken place over the 40+ years of the program. Thousands of sites have been reclaimed, resulting in the protection of public health and safety and the restoration of AML-scarred lands and waters. Since a picture is worth 1,000 words, we refer you to the website ourworkisnotdone.org, jointly developed by Pennsylvania and Wyoming, that shows the real and personal effects the state and tribal AML programs have had on the lives of coalfield citizens. While notable work has been accomplished, much remains to be done. There is little debate about the amount of work, nearly 900,000 acres of high-priority sites, or the cost, close to $11 billion. There is also agreement about how the nearly $6 billion received by the states and tribes since 1980 has been spent on project construction, planning, and administration. The question we have before us today is, where do we go from here? There is no other funding source to address AML work other than that authorized by SMACRA. These funds come either through the collection of AML fees paid by the coal industry or general treasury funds. Since 2006, all of these funds are mandatory by law and are targeted to certain priority sites or activities. HR 1734 would not change these aspects of the law. However, the bill would extend the authority to collect AML fees at current levels for 15 more years, which we believe is the minimum number of years that will be required to make an impact on the current AML inventory. It would also increase funding for the 13 minimum program states from 3 to 5 million, which is necessary given the impacts of inflation and the size of their inventories. HR 1734 would also restore federal reimbursement of states for monies spent on emergency projects that can be devastating for coalfield communities. Until 2010, OSM paid for these projects out of its discretionary share in order for states to preserve their traditional AML funds for other high priority projects. Given that a single emergency can wreak havoc on a state AML budget and on the planet it has undertaken for future AML projects, we believe it is critical to return to this reimbursement mechanism. The states have also taken a significant hit from sequestration to the tune of approximately $145 million to date. These funds that would otherwise have been spent on high priority AML projects. We believe it is essential to return these monies to the states for whom they were intended, and then sequestration going forward for all AML funding outlays. In the era of increasing economic hardship for coalfield communities, the work of state AML programs in partnering with others has become more important than ever. This is reflected in two other bills being considered by the subcommittee, the Community Reclamation Partnership Act and the Reclaim Act. Significant economic development work has and continues to be undertaken by the states, both in conjunction with their traditional AML projects and pursuant to the AML pilot program. There is significant bipartisan support for these measures, with both sides of the aisle recognizing the fundamental role of AML work in protecting human and environmental health, supporting well-paying jobs, and creating conditions for economic growth. The continued vitality of the AML program that Reclaim and the CRPA build on is our biggest and most immediate concern. We know the completion of the AML mission will require more funding than can be generated by the current AML fees over the next 15 years, plus the unappropriated balance in the trust fund. In this regard, we are open to working with all affected parties to consider all potential funding sources that will allow us to continue and complete this crucial work. The AML reauthorization bill is the linchpin that holds many of these efforts together and thus is critical in fulfilling the overarching goals of Congress. In this regard, we support timely passage of H.R. 1734 in the near future, given the quickly approaching deadline of September 30th for action. Thank you for the opportunity to appear here today.
Thank you, Mr. Stefanko. The chair now recognizes Ms. Kosak for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. As stated, I am Susan Kozak and I'm with the Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship. I am appearing today on behalf of the National Association of Abandoned Mineland Programs, for which I serve as president. We are a national organization that represents the abandoned mineland and environmental protection interests of our 29 member states and 3 Indian tribes. We appreciate the opportunity to appear before the subcommittee to discuss the critical bills you are discussing today. As the 117th Congress commences, the Abandoned Mineland Program approaches a significant crossroads. The Surface Mining Control and Reclamation Act provides states and tribes the resources and authority they need to counteract the massive and costly AML problems within their borders. But the AML fee on which the program relies is set to expire in September. This funding is critically important to protect and restore the health and safety of coalfield citizens and their environment. In an era of increasing economic hardship for coalfield communities throughout the country, the state and tribal AML programs work has become more important than ever. Since the first AML grants were provided to the states and tribes in the early 1980s, the AML programs have been addressing hazards such as mine fires, mine subsidence, and dangerous high walls. We're also repairing the environmental impacts of AML sites, including acid mine drainage. In the course of that work,
Ms. Kosak, we've kind of lost contact with you. So I'm going to come back to Ms. Kosak when she is able to reconnect, and I'm going to move forward to Mr. Parfit for 5 minutes. Welcome to the committee, Mr. Parfit.
Yeah, thank you. And good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee. My name is Todd Parfit, and I am the director of the Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality. Thank you for providing the state of Wyoming the opportunity to share our perspective on the Abandoned Mine Lands Program and the proposed legislation. PEQ's mission is to protect, conserve, and enhance the quality of Wyoming's environment for the benefit of current and future generations. The AML program addresses these principles through reclamation of historic abandoned mines and assistance to historic mining communities to eliminate public health and safety hazards and address the challenges presented by historic mining. The AML programs across the country work well together, collaborating on new reclamation practices and sharing a common set of principles, most notably protection of public health and safety, environmental protection and reclamation, and a commitment to fiscal responsibility. Everyone engaged in AML work is very familiar with the current structure, and in our view, it has worked well. The AML program provides real benefits to our state. These include the mitigation of hazards, creation of jobs, and the associated benefits for communities near AML sites that face their own economic challenges as coal production and related jobs continue to decrease. Last year, 782 people were employed in Wyoming through AML reclamation projects. The Wyoming State Inventory currently stands at $435 million and includes estimated consulting, clearance, and construction management costs in addition to construction. It's clear there's more work to be done. Historically, since the beginning of the program, national fee collections have been approximately $10.2 billion, of which $3.9 billion has been collected from Wyoming coal production. Of the $3.9 billion collected in Wyoming, 50% has been returned to Wyoming, less sequestration. Clearly, Wyoming coal companies have contributed far more than has been returned to the state. Coal industry has made significant contributions to date for funding the national AML reclamation activities. Federal fiscal year 2020 national fee collection was slightly more than $119 million, of which the fee collection from Wyoming was nearly $70 million, or 59% of the total. This demonstrates the significance of the Wyoming-based fee collection to AML reclamation nationwide. Coal production in Wyoming, though, has decreased by 53% since the peak production year in 2008. Based on funding formulas under Title IV, AML fees collected in Wyoming flow to the uncertified programs to support their reclamation efforts. Wyoming and the uncertified state programs are therefore directly linked. Additionally, the health of the coal industry in Wyoming is extremely important to the state's economy, to the communities, and to support industries. As we consider reauthorization, it's important to recognize that the source of funding for environmental protection and reclamation under the AML program is under stress. Without question, coal production is declining and facing challenging economic conditions. With the decline in production, we have seen a corresponding decrease in the amount of funds supporting AML programs. Since the 2006 reauthorization, the industry has seen a decline in market share and corresponding demand for coal. Therefore, in order to maintain a viable coal industry that supports AML reclamation needs, the fee should be reduced to reflect current market conditions. Coalfield communities nationwide are impacted by decreases in coal production and the associated loss of jobs and adverse economic impact. As coal production continues to decline in Wyoming, coalfield communities in the state are also being negatively impacted. Wyoming supports the objective of continuing to provide a financial resource to address public health and safety and environmental reclamation at abandoned mines. We also understand the need to provide relief to coalfield communities adversely impacted by the downturn in the coal markets. We ask that reauthorization not result in or create additional coalfield communities in need of relief in Wyoming. Wyoming Governor Mark Gordon supports reauthorization with a reduced AML reclamation fee. Wyoming will continue to monitor the progress of this important legislation and to support efforts to reduce the AML fee. And thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you, Mr. Parfit. I'm going to go back to Ms. Kozak if you're able to kind of reconnect. Are you there, Ms. Kozak?
I am here. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I apologize for that. I even came into my office today to make sure I had a good connection, so I
Well,
apologize.
we see you and hear you now.
Okay, I'll jump back in where I think I was. While the state and tribal AML program's primary mission is land reclamation,
Oh, we've lost you. We've lost you again, Ms. Kozak.
really?
Okay, now you're back.
Sorry. Looks like everything's good on my end, but I will just try and wrap up here very quickly for you. One of the AML's program's most important functions is to address AML emergencies. These suddenly occurring problems pose extreme dangers to homes, roads, or utilities. The AML programs also provide water line extension projects that deliver potable water to communities whose water sources have been lost or compromised. It should also be the annual AML grant distribution is less than $3 million as a minimum program. There are currently 13 programs across the country, including my home state of Iowa. This $3 million distribution was set over a decade ago, and due to inflation is currently insufficient to address the remaining AML with reclamation. Our program in Iowa is only able to reclaim a few sites per year, with approximately 200 similar challenges. For this reason, our association believes the minimum program distribution should be increased and an amount of AML work will remain. Mine hazards will fester and unforeseen AML emergencies will continue to occur. Coal country will go unrepaired. Mine drainage treatment systems serve funding for operation and maintenance. In many cases, the advances already made in restoration will be lost. If AML fee collection authority is allowed to lapse, and when limited remaining AML I apologize for the difficulties.
I think we lost you again. I think as every time, I think you were asking for additional resources and then you got cut out. There must be something about the content of what you were saying at the end. Only being facetious now. Hopefully when people ask questions, you'll be able to respond. Right now, I'd like to go forward and thank the panel for their testimony, reminding members that the committee rule 3D imposes a 5-minute limit on questions. And the chair will now recognize members for any questions they may wish to ask the witness. I would like to remind Ms. Gahozak that your full testimony will be in the record, so that we will hear you. I'm going to start myself and recognize myself for 5 minutes. For several years, Pennsylvania and Ohio, among other states, have been receiving money under the Abandoned Mine Land Economic Revitalization Program, which is a reclaim-like program that was created through the appropriations process. How has that program been working? Are there lessons that to be learned, that we can learn from that about AML reauthorization or the reclaim proposal. And I'm going to start with Ms. Lautzenheiser. I know you've mentioned Ohio has done a good job supporting the AML program. Maybe you can tell us if, what lessons you've learned.
Thank you, Chair. I'd be happy to address that question. Ohio has received now 4 years of AML pilot funding, and I think we've been incredibly successful in putting good projects on the ground. The projects that our state agency has supported run the gamut from traditional development, like stabilizing industrial parks that are on top of underground abandoned mines, all the way to supporting our growing outdoor recreation economy and closing dangerous mine openings that are adjacent to the trails that people are increasingly visiting. In Ohio, the 3 main takeaways that I have seen come about because of the AML pilot is that we need to diversify the types of projects that are supported, either with pilot or with reclaim. We need to involve local leadership and communities in deciding what types of development is the best fit for their specific locations, and that long-term planning is critical. Our economy in Appalachian, Ohio, and throughout the region is not going to be fixed with a single business or a single industry. We need to support a wide range of businesses, and Reclaim would do that. The most successful projects are the ones that local communities accept and are involved with. Specifically to me, the Wellston Recreational Complex comes to mind, a project that was led by a group of volunteers that were tired of having their children and visitors play ball next to a dangerous mine impoundment. Leaders can help bring in leveraged funding and commit to long-term maintenance. The provisions in Reclaim, specifically lifting up local community involvement, are critical to ensuring that these projects benefit the people that need it most. And finally, we've realized that passing Reclaim without including reauthorization would be near impossible. We need the long-term planning and program stability that reauthorization provides. Long-term planning, the ability to maintain the projects that are already built, and transparency within the state government and agencies are all key elements to any of the projects discussed today. I look forward to continuing to see the innovative projects that Reclaim and reauthorization would help bring about.
Thank you. I just have a minute and a half, so I want to ask also, Mr. Hughes or Mr. Stefanko, do you have anything to add about how what you've learned? Mr. Hughes?
Chairman, I think what we see is that community engagement is very important to these projects because it allows for the necessary transparency in government that our communities should be afforded, to listen to their local concerns and ensure that they're being addressed and incorporated into the reclamation plans that will benefit them. And we've seen that with one of our pilot projects in the Swearsville borough that Mr. Stefanko has been involved with myself and our partners in that community in Swearsville borough, an active coal company in Pagnani Enterprises, and the cogeneration facility plants that are looking to reclaim some coal lands there in that community with piles that have separated the communities for decades and taken out that material and generating electricity at some of the cogen plants in the region, and turning back some of that land that's being donated by the coal company to the community for community athletic and recreational areas is an economic development benefit to that community. And that's only phase 1 of the project. And it's a $12 million project at $4 million in pilot funding and some money from the AML fund to the tune of $650,000 towards that project is a part of that picture. And phase 2 would not be able to come to fruition if we don't see money from the AML fund or Reclaim like money coming in under the Reclaim Act to continue to take a look at the second phase of another 45 acres in that instance for that project. And it's vital that we reconnect and connect up those local officials and engage the communities beforehand as we're trying to get these projects on the ground, because those local leaders and residents know the lay of the land and know what they want and do want to work hand in hand with the owners.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes. We've kind of run out of out of time. We may be able to come back if we have a second round, but thank you. I'm now going to recognize Representative Cheney for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you very much, Chairman Lowenthal. I appreciate it. I appreciate all of our witnesses today. And I think, as has been noted by a number of the witnesses, the United States and Wyoming in particular produces the cleanest coal in the world. And it remains and will remain an affordable and a reliable source of energy, source of power for the nation. I think it's also crucial for us to recognize, though, the decline that we've seen, as the witnesses mentioned, since the program was last reauthorized in 2006. And as we go forward in terms of thinking about reauthorization, particularly the fee structure, reauthorizing at the current rate will further disadvantage coal companies and create significant impacts for the people and the communities who rely on a healthy industry for jobs and for income. I think it's important for us as we go forward to make sure that we're looking at a formula that is not just a straight reauthorization, but that looks at the potential for reducing per ton fees, and also looks at shortening the amount of time for which a reauthorization would be effective. Simply because of the economic circumstances in which we find the coal industry. What I'd like to do is ask first to Todd Parfit if he could talk a little bit about the impact in particular of NEPA requirements and how those affect the approval of AML projects. And if he could tell us whether or not he's got recommendations or suggestions that might help us to improve that process.
Okay, well, thanks for the question. And NEPA is an important part of the AML process that we go through today, but it takes time and it takes additional money to do the NEPA clearances for the projects. And sometimes these NEPA clearances can take years to complete, slowing down the successful start of projects. One recommendation that I would have related to the NEPA analysis is because we're dealing with already pre-disturbed areas and we're trying to reclaim them and bring them back to the natural conditions, is take a look at the NEPA process and create a categorical exclusion for abandoned mine sites, which would help streamline the process and reduce the cost.
Thank you. And Todd, could you also talk a little bit about, as you look at the balance between the benefit from the AML program, but also the decline that we're seeing overall, an industry that really is under significant stress, how should we be thinking about the duration of the program? Should we rely on the coal industry to fund this program until all legacy coal mining sites are addressed?
Yeah, so as has been pointed out, we've seen a reduction in collections in AML fees and a reduction correspondingly in the production of coal in Wyoming. Since its peak, we've seen it reduce from the peak of 2008, we've seen the production reduced by 53%, but the contribution has steadily grown. Back in 1978, the contribution of Wyoming to the AML program was 12%. Today, it's nearly 60%. That, coupled with the fact, as we've heard in the testimony, is that in just construction costs alone, it's estimated $10 billion worth of work remains. If you add the engineering costs on that, you're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of $14 billion today with the current inventory. And with the fees as they are now, if you assumed that it went on for 15 years, you would still only collect maybe 17% of the need. And so along with the reduction in the fee, we also would consider that moving the AML reclamation reauthorization forward, but for a more limited time frame to recognize the fact that the AML fee to the coal industry isn't going to cover the costs moving forward.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate that. And I want to thank the chairman again for the opportunity to participate today, and the Republican leaders, and I'll yield back the balance of my time. Thanks very much.
Representative Cheney. I now recognize Representative Levin for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate you holding this hearing today. Mr. Hughes, in your testimony, you mentioned multiple sectors as areas of potential economic improvement on abandoned mine lands, including agriculture, recreation, and clean energy generation. I'm particularly interested in the last of those three. Tremendous potential that these sites have for renewable energy siting. And not just abandoned coal mines, but abandoned hard rock mines, former military sites, and other similar locations. What should we be doing to encourage more renewable energy generation on these sites?
Thank you for the question. I think some of the things you might need to do is to kind of evaluate the grid infrastructure and the road infrastructure that's in place in those areas that will need to be developed to kind of gain more efficient access and to maybe reduce the transmission fade if we're looking at renewable energy and the electrical grid in the case of, solar, for example, or electrical generation, to kind of ensure that you're in close proximity to the major transmission and power substation areas to reduce a lot of the upfront costs. This is something that we're hearing from some of the industry that we're talking to when we're talking about solar development here in northeastern Pennsylvania. And you also need to work with local private landowners and tribal nations or the federal, state, or county entities that do have the land available to determine if it's going to be suitable to either maybe purchase that land outright, rent the land, look for long-term lease agreements for these sites that are being considered. Both of those options can lead to an infusion of capital and jobs and monetary benefits for both the owners and also the communities that we're trying to work in as secondary benefits. Encourage state governments to incentivize renewable energy projects on these types of sites that you're talking about, including brownfields and landfills, the hard rock mines, and these military locations you're mentioning, and our AML sites, and even reclaimed sites in disadvantaged communities across the country. If we could convince state governments to kind of require that a higher percentage of the electricity is sold in their alternative energy portfolio standards that come from renewable resources, that may help us push more direction into these types of lands that are needed. I know here in Pennsylvania, 30% of our electricity comes from renewable energy sources, so it could be higher, and it might encourage more of these sites to be looked at and developed and more appetizing, I guess, and that could help us get more land reclaimed in the future. And if we're able to provide more grants to nonprofits like ourselves and other alternative energy projects, we could then leverage some of that money, as we've seen that we've done in the Reclaim like projects so far with the pilot programs, and that might attract more people, investments, capital, and open up these lands for business to leverage private investment and create jobs in our communities.
Well, I certainly appreciate your enthusiasm. You make a compelling case for more support. You mentioned in your testimony that Epcamer, through a grant from the Reclaiming Appalachia Coalition, was able to develop a GIS tool to identify formerly reclaimed sites suitable for solar development. Can you tell us a bit more about how that's going?
Yeah, the project that it was a small mini grant that we really appreciate. We had about $10,000 with this grant that we worked with the Reclaiming Appalachia Coalition that has allowed my staff really to, they developed a site selection criteria tool, we call it, utilizing geographic information systems. And I kind of got to give it to my staff. They're quite savvy. And what they've done is they've been able to take different criteria for the proper development and siting of solar development on formerly reclaimed abandoned mine lands, because those sites are already reclaimed. They don't have to have the pits filled and backfilled and things that will take a lot longer to develop. So we're using this tool here in the anthracite region in the 4 major coal fields to identify sites that are in close proximity to the grid, that do have the substations close by. They got southwest facing areas for the sunlight. Their slopes are relatively low, and they're suitable for this type of development. And what we can do is use those attributes to really prioritize sites quickly and filter them out depending on the acreage that's available. And then that's the first phase of the project. And so in that phase, we were able to focus in on the anthracite region, and we know we could scale it up and take it statewide eventually if there was funds available and time and effort put into it.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes. I'm very grateful again for your enthusiasm. I led legislation last Congress to set a goal of 25 gigawatts of electricity from renewable sources on our public lands by 2025. I encourage my colleagues to support these efforts. It is now the law of the land. It became a part of the law during the omnibus last year, and we should be looking to abandoned mine lands and other lands as we pursue this goal. Let's work on it together. This will be a win-win for all involved. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back.
Thank you, Representative Levin. Next, I would like to have call upon Representative Gosar for 5 minutes of questions. Representative Gosar, are you there? See now? We'll come back. You could mute. You're muted. Can you unmute yourself, Paul? Is Representative Gosar there? I do not. Then I would like to call instead on Representative Graves, and we'll return. Representative Graves, I recognize you for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I want to thank all the witnesses. In Louisiana, when we dig subsurface, we hit water, and so our mining industry is not quite what it is, and many of the states represented on the committee today and by the witnesses today. However, there are parallels between what we're doing in Louisiana and some of the challenges we have, and what you're experiencing in many of the states represented, whether it be Minnesota or Ohio or Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Wyoming, and others. And that our historic energy production, dating back similarly when environmental knowledge and standards and sensitivity weren't what they are today, it relates to the loss of our coast. And of the chairman, I'm very appreciative of his trip down, and Mr. Huffman trip down to Louisiana to see firsthand one of the most productive ecosystems on the North American continent that is being lost at an extraordinary rate. But what I can't get away from is the fact that in this case, you're actually working, Republicans and Democrats are here working to actually address and mitigate and try and find solutions and revenues for the abandoned mines. And in our case, all we have is folks fighting us whenever we're trying to address some of the mitigation needs in Louisiana. So I did want to point out what I see as somewhat of an ironic situation here. And Mr. Chairman, with that, I want to yield my remaining time to Mr. Westerman, full committee ranker, excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. Graves, and thank you to the witnesses for your testimony. Since I've got a little bit of extra time here, I wanted to talk about an issue that's growing in our country and maybe be able to relate how abandoned mines can play into this. I have a publication here that's from the World Bank. It's called the Minerals for Climate Action, Climate Smart Mining. It's got some very interesting tables and data in it. One of these talks about the growing demand for rare earth minerals. At the top of the list is lithium, and it says by 2050, we'll have a 965% increase in the demand for lithium. You go down to cobalt, 585% increase, graphite, 383% increase, indium, 241% increase, vanadium, 173% increase. We have a tremendous demand for these rare earth minerals, and not just rare earth minerals. They also talk about how much steel and concrete and elements are required to build wind farms and to build photovoltaic cells. And I was shocked, just for a 3 megawatt turbine, it takes 1,200 tons of concrete, 335 tons of steel, and 4.7 tons of copper. That's for 3 megawatts. Not to mention 3 tons of aluminum, 2 tons of rare earth elements. Also, it requires zinc and molybdenum. So, and the global capacity for that is expected to increase by 63% by 2023. And then when you look at photovoltaic cells, there's also a tremendous need for these minerals and resources. Our country seems to be on a track to not mine these minerals and resources here. The policy positions right now seem to be to put land off limits for mining, which is going to cause a real issue in the future with supply chains and with where these minerals come from. And the reason I bring this up is because I believe there's some exciting opportunities with mine reclamation. And I will get into that more when I get my opportunity to ask my questions, but I wanted to lay the groundwork there a little bit for those questions. And with that, I'll yield back to Mr. Graves.
Mr. Graves, you have 25 seconds.
All right, Stauber.
All right.
Can I yield to Stauber?
Yes, you can. Oh, we'll come back to. Okay, Mr. Stauber, is there something quickly you want to say? Because you're going to get your 5 minutes and just.
I don't think Stauber's on right now. I think he had to go.
Okay, we'll come back. We'll come back.
Yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. I'm going to then move on to Representative Huffman. Representative Huffman.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for this hearing. Thanks to the witnesses. As we have heard today, there's an urgent need to address the environmental and public health damage from decades of coal mining. We're not talking today about lithium or strategic rare earth minerals that we're going to need more of in the future. We're talking about coal mining. And the world is obviously and irreversibly moving on from coal. But not everybody's ready to accept that reality. Boasting about the cleanest coal in the world is a little bit like picking the best looking horse at the glue factory. There is no clean coal. It's just not a real thing. And when some colleagues suggest that we should continue extracting and burning coal to meet future energy needs, they're in very deep denial, I think, about the realities, economic realities that are killing the coal industry. They're ignoring the irony of promoting more coal mining, even as we're working on legislation to clean up the legacy mess from this destructive, polluting industry. And they're suggesting that we should bypass cheaper, cleaner, safer, more abundant, clean energy alternatives in favor of a 19th century energy source that all of the science tells us is wrecking the planet. We've even heard the suggestion that we have to support more coal mining or else the funding necessary to clean up the industry's messes is going to go away, as if we have no choice but to stay on some kind of dysfunctional mining treadmill. It is not going to happen. The world really is moving on, and no amount of coal boosterism is going to change that. But our focus today is on something we can agree on. Cleaning up the coal industry's mess will revitalize communities and create local jobs. And even those of us who don't represent places scarred by coal fields want to make sure that kind of investment is a priority as we transition to renewable energy. There should be no community anywhere left behind as we tackle this climate crisis. So we all know that restoring watersheds is really good for wildlife and people. We all know that reclaiming these lands and rivers can encourage growth in the outdoor recreation industry, and that industry is thriving throughout the country. It can bring new economic opportunities to some of these places, tourism, recreation, healthy ecosystems. These are just a few of the positive things that can come from reclamation and remediation. I'd like to ask one of our witnesses a little more about that topic. Ms. Lotzenheiser, in your testimony, you talked about how reclamation and restoration is spurring a growing market in the outdoor recreation and ecotourism economy in your region. I wonder if you could just expand a little more on the importance of the diverse employment opportunities that come along with these new businesses.
Thank you for that question, Representative. I would be happy to talk about that. As I've said earlier, we understand that no matter what the future economy of Appalachia looks like, it cannot be dependent on any one single industry, or we'll get right back to where we are right now. Our natural assets, places like the Hocking Hills region, the Ohio River, and even trail systems like the Buckeye Trail and the Bailey's Trail system, they show great promise for economic growth in the future. When completed, the Bailey's Trail system is going to be the longest contiguous mountain bike trail in the eastern United States. We expect to attract over 180,000 visitors every year to this region just because of that one natural asset. Outdoor recreation as a whole, the industry adds over $887 billion in consumer spending annually. I know that my family is getting ready to pack up our bikes and go to a national park because that's what we do for recreation. In Ohio, we have over 215,000 jobs directly tied to recreation. Right now, that is more jobs than we have left in auto manufacturing. We've already seen 12 businesses open or expand because of the work we're doing with the Bailey's Trail system. That's the sort of economic diversification that our region needs. And that's the type of diversification that passing reauthorization and reclaim would continue to make happen.
And those jobs and those benefits are going to continue forever, not until the coal mining happens to run its course and we run out of coal, right?
Exactly. Recreation is a renewable resource, unlike the industries that our communities were built around at the beginning. We are really excited for the future that our communities have in attracting visitors and improving quality of life for the people that have lived here for generations.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
Thank you. I now recognize Representative Thompson for 5 minutes of questions. Welcome to the committee, Mr. Thompson.
Got it. Chairman, thank you so much. Appreciate the opportunity to return as a alumni of the Natural Resource Committee. I still out of sorts because I had to give up that committee given this past a couple elections ago. But thank you. Coal-powered the United States rise to global superpower fueled victory in 2 world wars and brought our nation into the modern era. It's done so much to raise the status of all Americans, and quite frankly, has kept us safe through that arsenal of democracy that coal led to. I also want to go on the record as saying that the scars we're talking about, a lot of that was directed by government for those scars not to be reclaimed, because they didn't know at the time how long those wars were going to go on, if they needed more coal to make more steel, to make more armaments, and they didn't know if there'd be a World War III. So these scars are really not at the fault of those coal mine owners as much as it was what, quite frankly, the federal government thought was prudent at the time. And despite considerable progress on environmental restoration, the need to clear up abandoned coal mines remains. Reauthorizing the AML fund will assist in cleaning up those sites and have the added benefits of spurring economic development in communities who have been impacted by mine closures. And as we've heard today, that's not hypothetical. That's reality. We can point to all kinds of great examples of where that has occurred. Now, my district has the most abandoned coal mines in the nation. And I'm pleased to join my colleague, Mr. Cartwright, in supporting and others in supporting the AML Reauthorization Act and the Reclaim Act to address these issues that are so important to the Commonwealth. So my first question, Deputy Director Stefanko, thank you for your leadership, your work, and being a part of this panel. Can you describe how Pennsylvania prioritizes and selects AML sites to ensure that funding is truly going to areas with the greatest environmental needs?
Always a pleasure to see you, Representative Thompson, and thank you for the kind words. Regarding how we do that, yes, it's through a lot of input that is provided from. We have an AML inventory that already has the priority 1s and 2 sites. We also have an extensive relationship with all of our partners that are out there, as well as we do get a number of inquiries on an annual basis. Most recently, it averages around 600 to 700 that come in from private citizens and others. That helps guide us as we move forward to identify those that are in most need to prioritize versus what's in our priority 1s and 2s, as it is in all states. And then we look at all of that and we get that on the list. So we look at the health and safety assets, the environmental assets, but also the considerable input that we get from the Commonwealth, the public citizens, as well as all of the groups that are out there.
Well, thank you for that. You mentioned in your testimony that administrative costs for states and tribal AML programs is only 7% of the total allocations. Now, that figure came from the Department of Interior. Is that correct?
That is correct. And it ranges depending on the states. It varies from state to state. It varies from 17 up to 15%. But yes, that comes from the OSM Interior's website.
You mentioned in your testimony that there are still some $10.8 billion non-funded AML liabilities. How much of that cost is due to the needed reclamation in Pennsylvania? And how many known AML sites are priority 1 or priority 2? And let me just also say that coal mine in Pennsylvania, that was good for every citizen in all 50 states because of what it was used for. It really was in the national interest, not just Pennsylvania's interest. So
that is correct. Within Pennsylvania alone, we probably have about $5 billion worth that's left to be known and needed to be reclaimed. As far as I can get back to you with regards to the number of priority 1 and 2 sites that we have left in Pennsylvania.
No, thank you. Mr. Hughes, thank you to you and your organization for what you do. Just real briefly, how will AML reclamation in general and organizations work in particular be impacted if we don't reauthorize this program prior to September 30th? Actually, my time has expired, Mr. Hughes. I'll look forward to catching up with you on that answer. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. And you can complete it, send out if you want a written request for that answer too.
I'll do that, Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I now call upon Representative McCollum for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this authorization is vitally important, and I'm glad you're looking at these pieces of legislation. Just a couple of points as serving on the committee which funds these projects. We've got a lot of abandoned mines today. We're talking about, as Representative Hoffman said, today we're focusing on coal. But there's different types of abandoned mines all across the country, and I think it's imperative upon us and this committee to make sure in the legislation that moves forward for mining that we don't create another situation like this in the future. So this is a very important hearing, Mr. Chair. I would just point out that my colleague from Pennsylvania, Mr. Thompson, talked about war production and benefiting the United States and all of that. I agree with that. I do. But the coal companies and the other people who did the added on value also made great profit off of this coal. And now we're looking at who's going to pay for the cleanup. And it's not going to be a lot of the people who created profit from the coal mining industry and the extraction process and the other things that it was able to provide energy for. The taxpayers are. So, as I said, this is an important reauthorization. I'm so glad that we're doing it. but I think it also should bring us to mind about proceeding with caution, looking at long-term polluter pays or how things are paid for, because it falls on the taxpayer. And this is only a fraction of the unintended consequences from all these mines in the past. So I wish all the testifiers all the best as you repurpose and reclaim back your land. But we need to make sure that you're not going through the agony that you're going through, that another group of constituents, people here across the nation, don't go through that. We can learn from our past mistakes, and it was a mistake not to provide for the cleanup of these by the people who profited from using them. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know it was a speech, but I'm at appropriations and everything comes back down to dollars, and I didn't have enough dollars to put in this account the way I would have liked to. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. And I'm now going to call upon return to Ranking Member Westerman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, as we talk about this important issue, that's a bipartisan issue. And, I've got some coal mining in my district in Arkansas, actually, but when I think about reclaimed mines in my hometown, there's actually a vanadium mine that was exhausted, and the company spent millions of dollars restoring that mine. And it's like a park. It's a wildlife sanctuary. I mean, it's beautiful land where they've restored it. So during the discussions today, I heard somebody talk about using solar on these abandoned mine sites. Now, I've got solar in my district too, which I'm a fan of solar. But one thing I've noticed about solar is you have to use a lot of pesticides. You basically want to, or not pesticides, but herbicides, basically want to create a desert under these solar panels. So Ms. Watsonizer and maybe Mr. Parfit, Mr. Stefanko, when you look at a reclaimed site, aren't there some pretty nice environmental benefits as far as green space and wildlife habitat that would be lost if you converted that to a solar field?
I appreciate that question, Representative. And, at first glance, I would have to say that there is more than enough abandoned mine lands to go around. I doubt that we'll ever be able to reclaim all of the sites and turn them into industrial facilities able to support solar or other clean energy sources. I think, as I highlighted in my testimony, that the future of abandoned mine land reclamation has to involve a diverse array of projects, from clean energy to traditional development like industrial parks, all the way to outdoor recreation like parks and green space.
Yeah, and as a fan of planting trees, I want to plant 1 trillion trees and use these abandoned mine sites for that. But also, and Mr. Huffman, this gets back to some of the discussions or comments you were making earlier, and this isn't about coal mining, what I was going to talk about. It's about American ingenuity. That same vanadium plant in my district that no longer mines vanadium, they converted the plant and they're able to take coke, which is a byproduct of coal, and extract vanadium out of that coke product. And the chart here says we got 173% increased demand for coke. And also in my district, we mine something called brine, B-R-I-N-E. It's like the water in the Dead Sea, except you pump it out of the ground and get a lot of useful chemicals out of it. And they've been putting it back in storage wells. They found out that this stored brine is very high in lithium. So they're able to pull the brine out of the storage wells. It's the largest deposit of lithium in the United States. So, and what I'm leading to is some of the discussions that were mentioned about being able to extract these rare earth minerals from what's left in these abandoned coal mines or even in new coal veins. And to meet this huge demand that we have for rare earths, that we don't apparently want to mine them off of federal land. So, Mr. Stefanko, Mr. Parfit, where are the opportunities there, and how many people are actually building these facilities to extract rare earth minerals from abandoned mines?
I can start, Representative, and because we've had a lot of interest within the state of Pennsylvania with regarding rare earth minerals. There's been a lot of generation from the Penn State University, as well as a lot of companies have been approaching us. A lot of testing has been done, and we did it in partnership with a lot of the coal companies within Pennsylvania. They've identified certain areas within Pennsylvania that have a high content of some of these rare earth elements. Most of it is found in the overburden, but we are definitely open to opportunities, and we've been having a lot of continuous discussions. And I can also say that when the IMCC meets, we have discussions with our sister states and other states in the compact with regarding this. So there has been a lot. It's come a long way from when it first began about 2 or 3 years ago, thinking it was not economically feasible, to the point now where there is a lot more interest saying that it is more economically feasible, and there are areas where these can be recovered.
Todd, do you have a quick comment?
Yeah, just a quick comment. We see interest in new mines for rare earth elements, but we haven't really had much activity on abandoned mines.
Out of time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ranking Member Westerman. I now call upon Representative Porter for 5 minutes of questions. Welcome.
Thank you. Under the law, the Surface Mining Coal and Reclamation Act of 1977, coal companies pay a fee on each ton of coal to help pay for the cleanup costs of abandoned mines. Mr. Parfit, in your testimony today, you urged the committee to reduce those fees. Do you know what the fee levels were when they were first put in place in 1977?
Yes, the fees back then were at 30, I believe it was 35 cents per ton.
Okay, for surface coal, and then 15 cents for underground coal and 10 cents for lignite. Does this look about right for the original fees?
That sounds about right.
Okay, do you know whether the fees have been adjusted for inflation, yes or no?
No.
No, the answer is no. They have not been adjusted for inflation. If they had been adjusted for inflation, coal companies today would be paying $1.52 for surface coal, would be paying 65 cents a ton for underground coal, and 43 cents for lignite. What do coal companies currently pay?
Currently for surface mine, it is 12 cents or 28 cents. And then for underground, it is 12 cents. And for lignite is 8 cents.
Okay. So my question here is, taking a look at this, what it started at, what it would be if it went to inflation, and what it is today, I understood your testimony to be, in your response to my colleague Ms. Cheney's question, to be that these fees should go down from the current rate?
Yes, that is correct.
Actually already at 18% of what they would have been if we had just kept pace with inflation.
Well, the point being is that if we don't look at correcting for what the market has happened to the coal industry, what we end up doing is you see more coal mines close and or less production. If you have less production, at the end of the day, you have less money available for AML reclamation.
I understand that, Mr. Parfit, and I think that's a good point. And I want to acknowledge that Wyoming is a certified state, and you've dealt well with your priority 1 and priority 2 coal cleanup. But if we adjusted this to inflation, you'd be paying about 13% per ton. And now you're paying around 3%. So I understand that there's less coal, but you're already paying a lot less than you would under inflation. There are about $11.4 billion worth of abandoned mines in this country that need to be reclaimed. With fees where they are now, understanding that you think they ought to go down from here, with fees where they are today, can you tell the American taxpayers, American public, about how long will it take to clean up our country's remaining abandoned coal mines?
So if I understand the question correctly, at the current rate of 28 cents, how long would it take to clean up all the remaining? And my estimation, if you assume that coal production will stay at the same level that it is today, it would take between 80 and 100 years.
Okay, so Mr. Parfit, 80 to 100 years if we don't reduce the fee. You want it to take longer than 80 to 100 years?
No, but I think you're making the point that what we're really facing is a situation where coal mines and the coal production is not going to cover the costs for what's needed for the abandoned mine land work that is remaining.
Absolutely, reclaiming my time, Mr. Parfit, but that's an argument for the fee going up, not the fee going down, or at least it's arguable which way that plays. I want to switch to Ms. Kozak for a minute if she's with us. I know she was having web connection trouble, but not all states have abandoned coal mines. Some states, like California, have other abandoned mines. This is a map of Los Angeles, San Bernardino, Orange, and Riverside County. Every bit of blackness you see on the map of this county is an abandoned mine. There are 11,567 abandoned mine lands on federal land in these 4 Southern California counties alone. But we don't get money from the coal funding program because our mines are hard rock mines, gold, silver, and other things. I wanted to ask, what would it mean if we could put funding in the next infrastructure package toward cleaning up abandoned hard rock mines, not just abandoned coal mines?
Hello, can you hear me? Okay. Okay, I switched to telephone. Thank you for that question. California is one of our members in our association, even though they are not one of the coal mining states. They do a significant amount of reclamation on those abandoned hard rock mines every year. And a hard rock mining law has been something that's been discussed recently, but we do not have a formal position as an association on that right now.
My time has expired.
Thank you, Representative Porter. I now recognize Representative Tiffany for 5 minutes of questions. Well, if Representative Tiffany is not here, then I'm going to call upon Representative Stauber for 5 minutes of questions. Representative Stauber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My questions are for Mr. Parfit. You discuss in your testimony a collaborative effort with the state of Pennsylvania to share information with the public about the AML program, what it has accomplished thus far, and what remains to be done. This certainly is a common goal. Although the needs of the Eastern and Western AML states clearly differ, could you discuss some of your efforts to work collaboratively with other states to reclaim mines across the country?
Yes, so in a couple of ways, with states like Pennsylvania and in other states, we share information on grouting techniques and subsidence experience, and so that we can learn from those experiences and benefit from that. Also, we have worked with geomorphic reclamation, which is a better technique, and we've shared that with states like Iowa.
And then, Mr. Stefanko, do you have anything else to add to that?
No, what Todd pretty much clearly stated is it's a lot of sharing of information. There was a lot of states that may have not had an issue such as treating acid mine drainage or some other things, and they're not familiar with it. And we in Pennsylvania are very familiar with it and have a lot of highly technical people. So it is a lot about sharing knowledge and the ability to reach out to all of our other coal impacted states and share that knowledge so that we can get things reclaimed.
Okay, and Mr. Parfit, this conversation about AML is a good example of the balancing act between preserving a healthy environment and maintaining economic strength and stability. Can you tell us about how the Wyoming AML program balances these interests and how vital it is to those goal to sustain a robust coal economy?
Thanks for the question. And yes, I can speak to it as an agency. We work very closely with our Wyoming Mining Association. And we also look at opportunities for innovations. And so we work with our University of Wyoming, and they have a carbon safe project, which is related to carbon sequestration, which indirectly then benefits the coal industry.
And then one last question. Could you tell us how the Wyoming AML program interacts with federal agencies and other landowners?
Yeah, so we have a lot of federal lands in Wyoming, and so there's a lot of opportunity to interface with our federal partners. Primarily, it's the Bureau of Land Management that we deal with primarily. And we have a really good relationship. We've talked to them about the issues with the NEPA timeframes associated with getting those approved, and worked very well to streamline those processes here in recent years to reduce the time.
Okay, and I see my time. I got a little bit of time. So Wyoming has been a certified state since '84, meaning the majority of the AML sites in the state have been considered remediated. Why is it important for certified states to have continued funding from the AML program?
Because back in 1984, when Wyoming became a certified state, and the same with other states, we certified at that time that all known coal had been funded through the AML program. And through better techniques in identifying abandoned mine lands, and through subsidence features expressing themselves each year, and particularly in the springtime, that list has continued to grow over time.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chair, I'm turning it back to you. I see my time's expired.
Thank you, Ranking Member Stauber. Has Representative Tiffany returned? I'm going to wait. If not, I think we've concluded with all the members asking questions.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Mr. Westerman would like to.
Absolutely. Mr. Westerman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I was doing a quick graph here and a little bit of math. The problem is not the fee, it's the volume. We're doing higher math here. It's volume times unit price. So forgive my hasty graphics, but if you had the cost across the bottom axis, the fee, and the production on the y-axis, what you're trying to do is maximize the area with fee times volume. So if you can drive the fee up and drive the volume down, and you find yourself in a worse predicament than you started in. So this idea that you can just add a huge fee onto coal industry, that's to reclaim mines that the current coal industry didn't develop those mines. I think that's another thing that's missed. We've got to use common sense and real math here, and use real economics, and understand that when you drive the price of something up, you get less of it. You can't just say it was X cents in 40 years ago and it hasn't kept up with inflation, but the production hasn't kept up either. There's 39% less coal being produced today. And first off, to put the burden of reclaiming mines that current mining companies didn't develop is not a fair process either. So I just wanted to make that point before we ended. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair? Mr. Chair, I have the numbers for how much we spent on this line in appropriations last year, if you'd like me to share it.
Absolutely.
So last year, and as you know, we fight for every little penny we get in the Department of Interior. Last year, the AML line was $9,480,000. And it was flat funded. It was the same amount the year before. And so unless there's significant increases that come into the Department of Interior's budget, it will remain flatlined. And as we now see how much just in coal country we have remaining to clean up. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just thought that the dollar figure might be interesting for the committee.
Thank you. I think we've had a very, very interesting discussion. I think all the points I think around this issue have been raised. I think it's really been effective. Just before we end, what I'm going to ask is, and I usually do this in all my hearings, is to be real quick, but to ask each of the members of the panel, is there one question you wish you were asked that you weren't asked? And briefly, within less than a minute, each of you to answer it if you want to. So I'm going to ask first Ms. Lautzenheiser, is there some question you'd like to have been asked that you weren't, and how would you have answered it?
Thank you, Representative. I would have appreciated the opportunity to be asked about how reauthorization and reclaim can help create a more just transition for communities like mine, but not just in Appalachia, communities all throughout our nation that are caught in the crosshairs of a shifting energy economy. I think one of the most important facts that we have to look at when I apologize.
Be very brief, because we just connected.
For every $1 million that is invested in AML reclamation, more than 13 jobs are created or supported.
Thank you. Mr. Hughes, is there one question you would like to have been asked?
Well, for Pennsylvania, I'd like to ask, why aren't we adhering to our Article 1, Section 27 of our Constitution? Why don't the people of Pennsylvania have a right to clean air, clean water, and the preservation of our natural, scenic, and historic and aesthetic values of our environment? That's what I'd like to have had asked.
And how would you answer it?
Well, we're not there yet, obviously, because we're still talking about dealing with abandoned mines and 5,000 miles of streams in Pennsylvania that are still polluted, and several 100,000 acres of abandoned mine lands that we have yet to reclaim.
Thank you. Ms. Kozak, is there some question you would have liked to have been asked?
I think the question I was hoping for is reauthorization needed, and that is the top priority from our association's viewpoint. There is so much work to be done. We are an economic development program, even if that's not what we call ourselves, and reauthorization is very important for our future.
Thank you, and it's good to see you again on the screen. Mr. Stefanko, is there some question you would have liked to have been asked, and how would you have answered?
Yes, the one thing I would like to have been asked is the actual cost, because there's been a lot of numbers thrown around today, and one of them is the $10.6 billion that it takes for construction. And I would like to have asked that first, number one, because that is not in considering a lot was brought up about inflation. That number due to inflation, and INCC and the NALM together went forward and put a analysis of that, and the actual real number for us to do the work that we need to do is actually 12.6, and we have a report of that, and we'd be happy to share that with the committee.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Parfit, what question would you have liked to have been asked, and how would you answer?
So the question would be, if we were to reduce the fee, how would we replace some of those funds that would result from the reduced fee? And the answer would be through reinstating the sequestered funds, which amounts to about a year's worth of AML collections, which would be $145 million.
Thank you. And again, I want to thank all the witnesses for their valuable testimony, and the members for their really very respectful questions. The members of the committee may have some additional questions for the witnesses, and we will ask you to respond to those in writing under Committee Rule 3-0. Members of the committee must submit witness questions within 3 business days following the hearing, and the hearing record will be held open for 10 business days for these responses. If there are no further businesses, without objection, this subcommittee stands adjourned. Thank you all for participating.